Welcome to our Mochi Podcast, the only podcast rated R for Robin. Today we have Amanda Dominguez. Amanda, say hi.
Hello.
So just a second ago, we were talking about manga stuff. Nana.
Yes. Nana. So you asked me when it first came out, and I see that it came out in 2000.
So it's like, it's not one of the super old ones. It's been like going on for like 30 years.
No. I really like the coming of age story or genre. I guess it's a genre. And
I would say it's less a genre and more of just like a story arc.
A story arc. Okay, so I really like that one. That story arc. And if I remember correctly, Nana, it sort of follows that. Considering I think if I remember correctly, it's these two roommates in Tokyo moving to Tokyo for the first time, like after graduating high school. Both of their names are Nana, and they're just coming.
Are they Japanese or?
Yeah, they're Japanese.
Okay.
One of them is like a punk vocalist, and the other one I think is more reserved and maybe is a student. I can't really remember. I read this like also 10 years ago.
How did you find it? Aside from like the big three of like shonen stuff, the ones that are like super popular, I don't really know how other people kind of pick out which mangas to go with. Because like a bunch of the ones that I first like came across all came from Toonami in the 2000s in the 90s.
So for me, I took a Japanese literature and film class in undergrad. Some other sort of media studies courses that introduced me to a lot of anime. And some of the films that I watched were based on manga. And I can't remember if Nana was it was a live action film that I watched. And I got curious about the manga from the film. Similar to 20th Century Boys. Have you seen that film?
I have no idea what that is.
It's actually pretty cool. It's part manga, or part anime, part live action, and it's based on a manga.
Is it like Lolita Battle Angel or whatever? I know that came out a few years ago.
Oh, I don't know what that
or
is.
Alita, not Lolita.
Alita. No,
Japan.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard of that one. But maybe. So 20th. Let me look at 20th.
There haven't been many great anime adaptations that have been live action.
Well, I like this movie. I would recommend checking it out.
How long's the manga series?
Oh wow. It has a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. But a 67% audience.
Okay.
So I guess I just remember it being kind of a fun watch. What were you saying?
No, it's just like it's interesting to me. Kind of like what you pick out, because if you don't read a bunch of manga, if you don't like check out just like manga reading sites, it's the most surreal experience is kind of like reading titles of different mangas, where it's like, oh, my dragon prince is my half brother, and like
that's a title of a manga.
I'm making it up, but there's like,
but they're okay.
There's like Kiss X Sis. There's how to be God, God of High School, lots of gods and shit. But I don't know, just like going through any sort of like manga Kakarot or manga reader websites, they all have just like so many like one shot or like not very well known mangas, and they just have the most peculiar names.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I should check those out.
My wife actually, in terms of like light reading, she loves reading. Very, very different from me, but like she loves reading what is essentially smut, and she also describes it this way. just like trash, like smut? Romance novels, smut.
Smut.
Yeah, it's essentially like,
I hadn't heard of.
They're essentially like pornographic books. It's kind of,
Oh, so like dime novels in a way.
dime novels.
Like raunchy
Yeah,
dime novels.
yeah.
Like raunchy dime novels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, she fucking loves reading those. She goes through them. She goes through like 2 or 3 a week. It's insane.
Of these like raunchy
Yeah,
books that you can buy at the gas station.
and all of the pictures of like a half shirtless man with like a hand on his chest. It's 50 Shades of Grey for people who aren't scared of like actual smut.
Okay.
50 Shades of Grey is like the Christian, like dipping your toe in smut.
Got it. Well, you know what? I remember like growing up and seeing these books in gasoline stations and whatever. And I haven't
Books or
recently.
magazines?
Where does books?
Huh.
Books, yeah.
I don't really think of anybody ever going to like a gas station to pick up a book.
Well, convenience stores.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really see I don't remember seeing books like these really in like proper bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
So where does your wife go to buy them?
I think she just gets them.
Does she buy them online?
I think she just gets them online. There's a lot of free ones. I think the last one she finished was called like Heartbreaker.
Okay, and what, you download them onto your Kindle or something?
She just gets them on her phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the characters always have like absurd names. Like this one main character's name is Falcon Gunther. What are his characteristics? He's strong and he was a Marine. That's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah.
And then it's just like sex for 100 pages.
A lot of it is like the woman trying to win the man's affection and get him to be more compassionate, and the man overcoming his hard exterior. Emphasis on hard.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, like, a lot of the time she's just like, I can't believe I'm reading this, but she keeps reading it somehow, and for whatever reason.
I think it's the same with reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
When I was packing up my apartment in New York, getting ready to move to Boston, I was watching 90 Day Fiance. Have you seen that?
I've never seen it. It's definitely sounds like a show that would be on like TLC or MTV in the 2000s.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much, I guess. And what happens is that the premise of the show is that there are these Americans who marry someone or like get engaged
Mm-hmm.
to someone overseas. And there is this visa in the US where it's like a 90-day fiance visa where you have essentially like 90 days to get married. That one. So basically it's a reality show about these Americans that are trying to bring over their partners from overseas.
Mm-hmm.
But I first started the first season I watched was the reverse of Americans trying to get visas overseas to live with their
significant others.
Significant others. And yeah, I mean it's the show was just absolute trash. I had that same reaction. Like, I don't know why I'm still watching this.
Oh my god.
Somehow...
People eat that shit up. It's why reality TV is so big.
And there's always like a hilarious Filipina.
Is there?
That is fun to watch for me, at least. Anyways, reality TV is really interesting. Do you watch any reality TV?
No, but I remember like it being on TV all the time, like before streaming services. Like, we would either be on like Cartoon Network, the Disney Channel, or like MTV. And MTV it was always like the dating bus, or no, it was called Next.
Okay.
Where there's like 6 girls in a bus waiting to date a guy, or like 6 guys in a bus waiting to date the same chick. And like you get money for however long the date goes, and then you have like at the end of the date you get to choose to take the money or go on a second date with the person. It's just like, this is the most like atrocious premise ever.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I ever watched that.
I mean, I guess it's a less like season get invested in the people kind of show. It's not like The Bachelor. It's more of like a quick shot kind of like Bachelor.
Right. Right. I've never watched The Bachelor either. But there's such a following.
Yeah, people love to get invested in these things, into these like these people who it's supposed to be their real lives, but like there have been a couple times where like I don't know if the winner was like everything was staged with the winner, or if like the ending was already like pre-made. But everybody knows it's bullshit, but you can't help but watch. It's like professional wrestling.
Right. Yeah. Have you seen Terrace House?
Terrace House.
That show, yeah. So it's a Japanese reality TV dating show.
Japanese is the weird selling point, I imagine.
And no, I mean it's so innocent, and dramatic in a very Japanese reserved kind of way. And it's a must watch. I think you should check it out.
Is it like a
watch?
Is it like a one season thing, or is it like?
So every season takes place in like a different place. So there's the season I recommend is called Boys and Girls in the City.
Okay.
Which is the Tokyo one.
Okay.
But I think they had one in one of the Japanese ski towns. I watched a little bit of that. They also have one in Hawaii. But the concept is they have this like the producers rent this like gorgeous property somewhere, and then they have spots for 3 women, 3 men, and they're able to they just live in that house and go about their daily lives and try and find love.
Does it have to be of the other 3 people who are in the house, or?
Yeah. The point is to like
try to match them up. Okay.
In the house, yeah. And all the women stay in one room, all the men share another room, and because it's Japan, they also share like a bathing space, and so a lot of like conversations happen in the bathtub.
What?
Not in an erotic way, not in an erotic way, but in Japan you like have these sort of share like baths are shared.
Okay, yeah, sometimes. I've seen it enough in mangas, I guess. Manga and anime.
Oh, I don't know about your manga and what kind of manga you read, considering what your wife reads. But yeah, and then another funny layer to this is that there are like these celebrities, Japanese celebrities and comedians that are watching the show and giving their commentary and making fun of the people in the show.
Yeah, they have a lot of those. Like they have like those commentaries over like obstacle course shows and like prank shows.
Yeah, I guess the Japanese like that. I mean, there's another
they like
show,
to watch.
They like to watch other people watching. Interesting. There's have you seen Hyper Hard-Boiled Culinary Report?
No, this sounds like the name of an anime, actually. It's definitely not.
It's a cooking reality show, Japanese also.
Is it like Iron Chef or like a competition kind of thing?
No, it's this guy with a GoPro, or at least like a simple sort of camera, and he doesn't speak any English really, and he travels to like bizarre, like really off the beaten path.
So he's like a Japanese Anthony Bourdain.
In a way, and he has conversations with people, but like, one episode he was, in this Russian Jesus cult camp, and just having a conversation, asking them what they
in
eat,
Japan
with a translator. No, he travels the world.
I see.
So this was in Russia. But he had one episode in Compton where all like the people's faces were like blurred, and they were just showing all of their weapons and talking about gang stuff.
Does he have a translator that comes with him?
Yeah, okay. He has a translator, and then there was also one episode where he is like, sort of hanging out in this cemetery somewhere in Africa where people are living.
Interviewing the corpses?
And just interviewing, people who've dug up graves and live inside these graves because they have nowhere else to live, and just has a conversation with them about like what they eat.
Oh, shit.
And what life is like there. So this guy, And then they have this celebrity sort of chef, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Hard to really know. With this guy watching also in Japan and commenting
Mm-hmm.
on what he sees. I really recommend this show. You should check
What's it
it
called?
out. Episode Hyper Hardboiled Gourmet Report.
So what does it have? So the gourmet and stuff, is that specifically about food stuff, or is it like
Yeah, I guess it's about food stuff.
okay.
I mean, but really, it's not exactly a food show per se.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think that's how he breaks the ice with people, where he just asks to have a typical meal with
But
them.
I guess it's kind of like
Whatever
how understanding how they subsist, or like
Yeah, and just have a conversation. He basically just shows, it's great journalism. How people are living in places that people, I guess, don't had never heard of,
mhm.
or either had never heard of, or really truly don't have a real sort of insight into how people live in
Yeah.
that way.
It's
great.
There's this one place in Japan, apparently, like it was this colony of North Koreans who like kind of fled the country but are still funded and protected by like North Korea.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of the Koreans who moved to Japan at that time were discriminated against. They weren't able to become like proper citizens or whatever. And North Korean Kim Jong something was sending them financial aid and like helping them build schools and stuff. And so like there's a I don't know if it's like a town or like a district of Japan that is full of just North Korean supporters.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
One thing I'm always curious to hear about is like how like celebrities in other countries, just because like everybody can name like LeBron, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson. Everybody knows like Super Mario. I just don't I don't know how different countries kind of like pick what their different celebrities are.
Oh, okay. You mean in terms of their field?
Yeah, like Japan. The only celebrities I could probably name there are people who play video games, but that's only because I like follow video games. I don't know any like pop stars that isn't like a holographic teenage girl.
Are there holographic teenage girl pop stars?
Hatsune Miku, yes.
What?
She's like what the U.S. did with Tupac Shakur, where they have this hologram who's just like playing their music. They've done that in Japan, and she's just like this holographic anime girl that everybody swoons over or whatever.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. What would you say about like the Philippines?
Cool.
Who would you name besides like Pacquiao as like celebrity?
Well, there's a ton of celebrities in the Philippines. Can I name them? I mean, I think we do have.
But are they like music, movie, TV show?
Music, movies, TV shows. I think quite similar to the U.S. in that, in entertainment culture, I think is quite similar. We don't have any holograms that I'm aware of. But a lot of like, soap opera stars that eventually maybe do some interesting sort of Filipino art house. But we do have a robust local entertainment scene, including music and film and TV.
There was this one dude. Apparently, he was embezzling a fuckload of money or something. It was the dude from Wawa Wee.
Oh, Wawa Wee, that's one.
That's an old ass show.
Yeah, one of my best
Boom
friends.
tarat tarat, boom tarat tarat.
Yeah, one of my friends perform. Oh no, it's Eatbulaga, not Wawa. Have you heard of Eatbulaga?
I think I might have. My grandma loved to watch these shows in the U.S.
Yeah, one of my friends would perform as a backup dancer on the show. She's a professional dancer, and these are pretty solid gigs. Those like noontime sort of game shows / like all around entertainment. So yeah, these are celebrities. I mean, these kinds of celebrities, again, like there's a huge following for local TV, and I think all around the world too. Like the Filipino network in the U.S. I think is pretty popular, and I think it's available in Europe as well. The music scene, I truthfully don't follow too much, but it's something that I'd like to get into. I heard about this artist. I think her name is called KZ, who did a song for that new Disney movie, Raya and the Last Dragon. Have you seen it? You have to see it if you haven't yet.
Wait, what Disney movie?
Raya and the Last Dragon.
This is a mainstream Disney movie? I haven't heard anything aside from like their remix in Seoul, I guess.
It's the new Disney princess movie. It came out last month.
Really?
And it's a Southeast Asian Disney princess.
Raya and the Last Dragon?
Yeah. So there's some Filipino elements in it. Like she does, I can't remember if it's her or her father, but they fight Arnis. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I learned Arnis when I was in Davao.
Great. So they do Arnis, and it's inspired by sort of all Southeast Asian cultures. But one of the songs on the official soundtrack is in Tagalog by this one singer.
Oh, that's cool.
Who I hear is pretty popular, and I'd like to get into her music more. It's really cool.
Was this released on like Disney Plus or something?
Disney Plus, and actually I saw it in theaters. I went to the movie. It was like my first film. It was my first movie theater experience
in a while
since the pandemic started. Yeah, like a couple of weeks ago. So it's out wherever there are movie theaters open, and also on Disney Plus. You should see it.
It's interesting because I haven't heard any promotional material or seen any ads for it.
I wonder if that's because of the pandemic.
I remember like the last big one was like Mulan, and that kind of flopped.
Yeah, that flopped. I mean, she said the actress was, I think, controversial, right? The lead.
That sounds familiar. It rings a bell, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I think I've also been, I think this was pretty popular in the Filipino community because all Filipinas out there were so excited, or at least my friends were so excited to finally see a Southeast Asian
Filipinos
princess,
get
right. I think
Filipinos get hyped as shit for other Filipinos.
Yeah, which is, there are so many of us, right? I think people I speak to, and I just had a conversation. One of my friends texted me. He's from Colombia. He texted me yesterday saying, I had no idea there were over 100 million people in the Philippines. He was at a presentation and someone was talking about some health tech startup idea, and was the idea was for the Philippines because of this massive, this massive population and market.
The Philippines, I believe, is bigger than the UK. It's bigger than Japan.
In terms of population, or in terms of size.
I think size. I think Japan has higher population though.
Does it? More than 100 million?
They got a fuckload of people on those tiny islands. Oh wait, I can't look up. This is my camera. God damn it.
I'm gonna look at but well, I know that size-wise, all Philippine islands can fit in the state of Arizona.
Well, the U.S. is just fucking big.
Yeah, the U.S. is huge.
I mean, Texas is enormous too.
Japan is bigger, 126 million. We're almost there, 105.
And with the size of our fucking families.
Yeah.
Tito, tita, lola, lola.
Exactly. But I think, given how big we are, right? That this is just another, we're comparing ourselves to even just Japan. They're 10, 15 million more than us. We have so little representation and awareness of our culture internationally, yet we are so huge, and we have such a huge diaspora. So I think it's super. I think it's super awesome that we get hyped.
I remember in the 2000s.
People need to know who we are.
I remember in the 2000s. I think Journey they got a new lead singer who, and everybody was really excited about he's a Filipino, when people found out also Rob Schneider's Filipino, that was also a big deal. I think
sure.
When everybody started questioning The Rock's ethnicity, Filipinos were just like, Come on, 23andMe, come through for us.
Yeah. No, I mean,
But yeah, it's
it.
interesting because like a lot of these countries, like Hawaii, the Philippines, Guam, uh, like they're very much connected to like America in very different ways. But like Hawaii is essentially like America's part ownership of Asia. Uh,
Yeah.
Guam,
Or alternatively, I would say Asia's part ownership of America.
technically, the U.S. got rid of their queen, so I'd say it's a little bit more difficult to.
I guess. I guess. No, but I was more thinking about how it is a very Asian place now.
To me though, it's like the flavorful way of like going to Asia for an American without having to go all the way to like the Far East. It's like a way for them to say like, yes, I am in Asian territory. I am in a place that is majority Asian, Pacific Island or whatever. But this is still part. This is still my land. This is still American land,
Yeah.
and that's why I've got this whole hang up with it. It's the same thing with like Guam. That was very much like a tourist place. Um, and like we hear all the time about like Puerto Rico getting statehood. I mean, I never ever really hear Guam in that discussion.
Well, I think Guam is also like much smaller than Puerto Rico.
Yeah, but you just never hear about them in many
Yeah.
discussions about Washington D.C. is like everybody's trying to pine for statehood for there.
Right. And but not Guam. Yeah, interesting. I actually have family in both Hawaii and Guam.
Hmm.
So I wonder what their perspective is
And
on
yeah,
this.
there are a lot of these places in I think like Madrid in Spain. Uh,
Yeah.
there's like another place where they have like a unique ethnicity. They've got like unique speaking cultures, and like
Ask
say again.
in Spain.
I think so. I think it's Madrid.
Okay.
I'm probably wrong, but I think like they speak Catalan or something there.
Oh, right. In Barcelona, in Catalonia, in the
Yeah,
north.
and
Mhm.
there's a lot of people saying like, oh, they want to be independent. Like I don't know how like Guam feels. Would they want it to be independent? I don't like these places that are U.S. protectorates. We talk about other places like giving them like they should have their independence. They should have their rights to self govern and whatever. Like Puerto Rico, we're just literally fucking them over with tax as like a tax loophole for a lot of like businesses in the U.S. Like should they also have their right to be independent countries? I don't really see why they wouldn't. You know. And the Philippines was almost in that same boat, but we technically gave the U.S. technically gave Philippines independence in like the '60s or the '70s.
Yeah, after World War II, actually, so late 40s.
Yeah. So
And it was more of a like we've ruined your country. Thank you for letting us carpet bomb it.
we'll
Um,
let you guys rebuild it.
here's
We don't have to. We're not
yeah,
responsible for that shit.
yeah, we're not a part of it. Thank
Hawaii,
you
they
though.
only got our port. We can fix that.
Yeah. I think what as I have one of my closest friends is Puerto Rican, and I think we talked a lot during about sort of this past election, and I think what was difficult for him was that um, well, he explained this to me that Puerto Ricans have to either register to vote in Puerto Rico
Hmm.
or in some state in the U.S. And if they register in whatever state in the U.S., that's the only way they can vote in a federal election.
Hmm.
So for the president. Otherwise, if they're registered in Puerto Rico, they can only vote for their local government.
Hmm.
And he felt very strongly about voting in the presidential election. And so but his family was very much against that because they wanted him to remain a voter in Puerto Rico because of their sort of interests
Hmm.
in like the next governor or whatever. So it was for him, it was kind of a struggle not to be able to do both
Hmm.
and what that meant in terms of his identity and his rights,
Yeah.
and what it means to be a Puerto Rican slash American. Can like, well, what are these two separate identities and why are they separate,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It's especially I just two things I would kind of want to like bring into the conversation. Also, like just on the topic of like places that were like we're kind of rooting for independence, um, like Taiwan and Hong Kong. Like the
Yeah.
only reason like I guess more people have a stronger opinion about this is because like boo China, you know.
Yeah.
But like in our own home territories, so to speak, like we try not to think too hard about whether or not these other countries that are part of the U.S. One, should they be allowed to be not part of the U.S. And two, if they are part of the U.S., why don't we give them equality?
Yeah.
But like also in the discussion, I think the same thing with like a lot of like Mexicans who came over and and don't have legal status and like especially as kids and they speak English, they might speak some Spanish, but like telling them to go back uh, to a country that they've never really known, they've never, there's a lot of this placelessness that I think we're finally starting to address in the U.S., which is a good thing.
Right.
But I don't know, the baby steps approach is a really aggravating, upsetting method.
Yeah. Well, what was it sort of like for you growing up in the US as part of this Philippine diaspora? Do you feel like connected to the Philippines at all still? Like,
I
are you
I love
just,
Filipino
are you
food.
American?
I love Filipino food.
Okay.
My family, we all lived in the suburbs, and there were a couple other like Filipinos that we knew, so we had like Filipino friends, and I loved going to like Filipino birthday parties because there was just like fuckloads of food. Parents are doing whatever, they're drinking, doing karaoke. The kids are playing, they're running around, throwing balls and shit. Every once in a while, the parents would like call down somebody's like, oh, play the piano for everybody or sing that song for everybody.
Yeah, the performance bit is key.
Mhm.
Everyone has a perform at some point.
Everybody needs to be a performer if you're Filipino.
Yeah.
But in that sense, I think that's how I kind of got like the Filipino experience in the U.S. My parents were always yelling at us in Tagalog and Visaya, and I never really knew what they were saying. I never learned the Tagalog, but I always knew when I was in trouble. And like I went to the Philippines a couple times. I stayed there for a month or two. I learned Arnis. I tried to learn more Tagalog Visaya, but yeah, it's always been difficult because just like anytime because there weren't a lot of Filipinos, and there weren't many Filipinos in a lot of media. I was just cheering for whenever there was an Asian, and so like my bigger role models were always like Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, Jet Li, and all these kung fu movies. Like this was part of my culture, even though it wasn't part of like Filipino culture.
Got it.
Being like an Asian American, I think, kind of superseded being a Filipino American.
Right.
And like now everybody's getting hype because the Jollibees are starting to pop up in places. Everybody knows Pacquiao.
Yeah, everyone knows
Yeah,
Pacquiao. I mean, what an incredible athlete.
yeah.
What an incredible human.
What a senator.
Um, yeah, that is, I mean, it's tricky, right? I think he's definitely, I mean, I don't know. From where I stand, it doesn't seem like he's in it for the money at all.
He has fun.
And I struggle a little bit.
He likes competing.
No, I mean
Oh,
politics,
okay.
because in the Philippines, you go into politics for the money. Sadly,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people, there's a lot of corruption, and I don't really think he's that way in particular. I think that we talked a little bit about celebrities in the Philippines,
Mhm.
and I think something I should have mentioned, but now I'm sort of realizing is that it's almost like a natural next step to someone who's gained some kind of fame in the Philippines to like, enter politics in some capacity,
Try to
right? So we
sway
have,
the political
right,
discourse in some
or
way.
no, or no, I think it's yeah, maybe, I don't know if it's really sway political discourse as it, or maybe it's more of like seizing this opportunity since you've gained
Hmm.
popularity, and all like politics is a popularity contest, and see sort of reap the benefits of what it means to be a politician. I don't mean to say that everyone in politics is corrupt, but
The
I
vast
think it's safe
majority.
to say most
Yeah.
are. Yeah, so we have like our president when I was growing up, he didn't even finish high school, but he was a famous
Mm-hmm.
actor. Arab. Also, right now, I think in Senate and Congress, we have a number of like former talk show hosts, like
Oh,
whatever. We
great.
have Pacquiao now, who's a boxer, and I think
How long has he been a
he ran
senator?
for first Congress first. I think Senate was after. I don't know. It's been years now, maybe more than 10 years that he's been in office. But I think that's again the logical next step in the Philippines, right? I think it's maybe in some ways you get, I don't know if I guess it's part of like it's in that sort of popular journey,
I
that
think it has something to do with like it's like the new like the new nobles, the new royals.
yeah, I guess so.
Establishing
So
yourself
for
in this like higher society, you get into politics in some degree.
yeah, and yeah, I guess that's it. And for him, I know he's donated a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
to Mindanao and where Sarangani, where he's from, and he's built hospitals, he's built schools, he's done good things. So I would hate to sort of criticize his public service that like he's helped.
He
And
doesn't
from a
strike me as a dickhead in any way.
No, but okay,
At least not
it's not
intentionally.
just that. I don't think he's a
Yeah.
dickhead, but it's also like know your strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps and I think that the issue is that like he may not be the most qualified person
Mm-hmm.
to be like in legislature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate to say like
Uh,
stay in your field, but there are some where there isn't just like proper crossover.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Like they told a lot of like basketball players in the U.S. to like shut up and dribble, when they're like when they're talking about, oh, stop shooting black people, the shut up and play football, don't kneel during the anthem. You're protesting you're protesting America. It's like, okay, so killing black people is part of America, and you're agreeing to that. And just there are places for them to like voice their opinions, but like definitely when it comes to like legislation and make like codifying the rules that are actually going to absolutely affect people's lives, that is something that kind of requires a bit of like dedication and expertise.
Right.
And just having an opinion in it is not great or not good enough.
Maybe I don't know. Call me an elitist, but maybe a law degree. I'd like to think that people who are like writing laws have a background in law, or at least for the most part have had. Again, that's not to say like, again, I don't know. What is the solution? I mean, you look at Philippine government and you look at the Philippine politics, and it's so messy. And every layer there's there's corruption, there's just a mess, and I don't know what. Attacking one politician.
I'd say one thing I like as far as election reform, and I think this would apply in pretty much any other country, is fixing how campaigns are funded. Getting it out of like ambiguous like dark money, getting it out of like just businesses donating however much money to the politician they like the most, that's going to give them the least regulations or whatever. Getting that to not be okay, not legalize, getting rid of legal bribery for politicians.
Yeah, legal bribes.
And I feel like in the Philippines that would especially be a particularly big thing.
I don't know, because I think we just openly don't follow laws, right? So I don't think that will matter.
Fuck the police.
So like I know. I mean, like we have had like one of the presidents that we had when I was growing up, Gloria Arroyo. I think there have been instances where she just publicly apologizes for corruption. I mean, you know what I mean? To have like a big and I think this has happened in the past where it's just like there's such a complete disregard for how things should be run that, again, putting these sort of, putting more sort of red tape in place, I don't think is going to change the way.
But do you think do you think this is some sort of issue of like technology, or is it? So a lot of
it's not a technology thing. It's a social thing.
Because I know a lot of places like after World War II and like in the 20th century, just like so many places went from kingdoms and kingdoms, royalties, whatever, and then like just they were like thrust into democracy, and were given experts to help them shape their constitutions, their like rule of law, and how those things are constructed. And everybody's been having to play catch up, while like socially everybody isn't like it didn't arise organically. It was always introduced by a foreign power or a foreign investor.
Yeah, and that's a problem, I think, for the Philippines and a lot of the post-colonial world, right? And a lot of, like, I think Latin America, where, you know, we were kind of given democracy. We didn't earn it. We didn't fight for it. Like in the same way that the French had the French Revolution and the U.S., you know, had their Civil War and make in social, you know, there's that saying in like political science that like, you know, it's out of this sort of bloodshed that these changes are made and are real, because unless you've really seen the consequences, or you've actually fought for something together as a nation and have that nation building exercise, you know, it's difficult to sort of like superimpose a system that wasn't organically developed as a result of the social issues that the group was facing. So I think in the Philippines, we were given these laws that we didn't necessarily, in a way we did fight. We fought to remove our foreign rulers, but we didn't necessarily like fight amongst one another
to fix
to fix.
Yeah, it didn't come across as like we're fixing these problems that we have had and that we know how to deal with. It's we were told that we were wrong by a bunch of other people, and we're just trying to get them to stop telling us that we're wrong, but we also still want to maintain trade with them.
Yeah. And it's and again, also just having, again, I think democracy and having these sort of principles of democracy come from like a long history of this conflict, and a long history of like really felt the need for it, and like people came to the US running away from something to have this, right? So there's that anchoring ideal, where in the Philippines I think we don't really have that exactly. I think in many ways we've been mobilized, like with a people power revolution, overthrowing. We have had moments, but they just haven't really, you know, I don't know. But again, we are still using this post-colonial set of laws and structure, which still, you know, somehow allows all of the like old aristocracy and just like the oligarchs to remain in power. So like there isn't upward mobility. There's not real like change. That I don't know what the solution is, and it's tricky. If you were to ask me how to redesign the Philippine government, I wouldn't have an answer. It's so complicated. It's super, super complicated.
Personally, I think like the rule of law, super important. It's good that it's introduced, but at the same time, like a lot of the reason I think places adapted and like opened up becoming a democracy as like one of their core values is because of the need to maintain trade with like foreign powers, foreign countries, and just allowing like foreign investment to dictate what happens for your government, for your country's government, and like that's still happening in a lot of places, and it's
it's interesting.
I think it's because like democracy and capitalism were kind of handed to these countries as a package. And people didn't know how to say no to one without forfeiting the other. Like now we're kind of working on figuring that out. I mean, the U.S. is also we're like in the midst where we're ground zero for finding out. Oh, capitalism is also super fucked. You know, it's not just communism that's evil.
Yeah, I was talking to some people the other day who are like, you know, in school with me, but are here for sustainability and wanting to.
So you're at MIT now? Or you're like back to?
I'm at MIT.
You're taking lessons again?
Yeah, I'm back at school. Okay. Yeah, I'm in business school at MIT, and there are a lot of people that are here for sustainability, and I was listening to some of my friends talk about it, and how, the only way for us to have a sustainable future is sort of capitalist principles of growth and at all costs,
Yeah.
profitability, increasing profit or whatever at all costs. So that whole, so I wonder, I mean, I haven't really ever, I mean, I've sort of thought about this since that conversation I had recently, but I haven't really thought about it in a meaningful way. But it does make sense that in order for us to have like a future that is kind to the environment and sustainable, right, to human life and all life and just earth life, yeah, we have to change that mindset completely. That sort of those core capitalist principles that are kind of governing most corporations in the world. So I don't know, what is the solution to that? What should the goals be of enterprises moving forward? I mean, how do we go about making those kinds of changes and not putting, profits first?
Maybe it's just my solution for everything, but don't let them buy politicians is the big thing. So like,
Yeah.
government can go back to actually governing for the purpose of making people's lives better, as opposed to making things just making growth more
Right.
lucrative for businesses.
Yeah, so dismantling the election funding. Yeah. So then what would be an alternative way to fund
I've seen like public
candidates?
funding options. Like everybody gets like a credit for however much money they want to donate individually to groups, and like this is something that could either come from like taxes. Everybody's just given like a flat amount. So businesses, they don't get to fucking pool money together and say like, oh yeah, we are a person and we're able to donate like millions, if not billions of dollars to probably just millions. Nobody's donated $1 billion to any fucking politician.
Oh yeah.
But like,
That would be interesting.
there have been a lot of alternatives. I've only looked through a couple of them. Same thing with like alternatives to traditional policing. It's hard to say. Like I haven't done any of the research. I haven't done any of the studies. I'd like to talk to the people who have, but like it just seems like fundamentally we need to make the rule of law not be dictated by the people with the most money.
So I'm curious to hear about alternative policing. What do you know about that?
So traditionally, a lot of like police have specifically, or a lot of policing has been historically in the U.S. to keep poor people poor people down, essentially just imprison them, keep them working menial jobs, keep them working just like bullshit jobs. I think the first, not the first, but like one of the original jobs for federal police in the States was to return slaves back to their owners. And like now police go after petty theft, police go after nonviolent drug crimes. They're allowed to do civil asset forfeiture, which is just like they can take your money at a stop for whatever reason. They can like take like anything that's like in your trunk as, oh, this could be potentially be evidence, and they have there's nothing that says that they need to give it back to you, which is nonsense.
Interesting.
So like a lot of the solutions have been moving a lot of funding that goes traditionally towards like police academies, towards like the police weaponization and militarization, and moving that towards like places in communities that would actually help prevent that would reduce the amount of crime by making people's lives better. So like libraries, funding schools, funding counselors for underprivileged people, making sure that people have access to social safety nets.
Okay.
Because a lot of what modern police do, aside from just arresting poor people, is they're kind of like they're there to like pick up the homeless, to make sure that that people aren't loitering, that they aren't being a nuisance to wealthier people's eyes, essentially. And so a lot of people are saying like abolish the police, and you do that by making their role not necessary. Like, sure, there are still going to be people that need to like go after violent drug crimes, that are going to have to go after murderers, that are going to have to go after all these, all like the more heinous crimes. But you know, where they are used more as an institution to fill prisons, which is the modern use of slavery, as opposed to actually benefiting people, benefiting societies.
Right.
They're
So
like the
investing
stick.
in better infrastructure.
They're the stick
Yeah.
without offering any sort of carrot.
Right, right, right.
Um,
Yeah,
it's always
I
funny.
think so.
It's always funny in a lot of countries, when anytime there's any sort of revolution, anytime there's like dictatorships, corrupt governments, anytime there's like some sort of insurrection and the people are revolting, the police are never on the right side of the conflict. They're never supporting the people. They're only used by the government to keep people to shut the fuck up and stop making problems, even if like those problems are actually fixing the grievances that corrupt politicians or the police forces themselves have been causing, like in the case of the U.S.
So how do we change? Imagine if we had like citizens be in charge of the police, right? Instead of having like officials oversee, government officials oversee the police or giving commands to the police. They already have, I mean, how would that work? You know, I mean, it's just really complicated because on the one hand, the way like democracy is supposed to work is that like you are choosing, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
It's still you still get that by prioritizing people's needs, by prioritizing like giving them
yeah,
the mobility to improve their status in life. Like by it's part of it's the lower level, the more micro fix to society's woes, kind of like on a macro scale. You could take a lot of money from the military industrial complex, just like get like slash the Pentagon's budget by half, by three-fourths, and then use that to actually give people things they need, like healthcare uh and renewable energy, better infrastructure. You could do these things, and it would reduce the amount of just the daily problems everybody's having. We could do universal basic income. It's hard to say what the larger economic impact of that's going to be, but the reason why we don't want to go towards that is because we already know that starting wars in places and funding autocrats in other countries, that already makes us money. We don't want to have to, and at least for the people who are making money, they don't want that to change with anything questionable like universal basic income or healthcare or free healthcare. I don't know.
yeah. No, the question of healthcare is certainly um, something so important and something, yeah, that determines so much
Yeah, if you go
about,
bankrupt,
yeah,
if you've been working your entire life and then somebody in your family gets cancer and you go bankrupt because of that, even if you've been like saving your entire life, you've got a nice house, you've got a good job, whatever, you can ruin that. That can go so south so fast, uh, without like any recourse. You could have insurance, you can go have, you know, you could have everything, and then just like somebody gets in an accident, you know.
yeah. No, it makes me so sad to think about. But at least, you know, it's really remarkable that you know that Europe, you know, offers you know, free health, universal health care to, you know, its citizens and people who are residing
Hmm.
there. And it's really such a, it's really, you know, so my significant other is from
Hmm.
Spain, and it's such a different mindset, right? Or like, you know, to think about how when you're, you know, work wise, when you're negotiating your salary and you're thinking about your earnings, how that kind of just goes to, you have way more flexibility in terms of where you want to put that
Hmm.
money, right? Because your kids will be educated no matter what,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, no matter, you know, whatever you decide, they'll have an education. And and more often than not, up to a master's degree, right? Funded or like paid for by tax money. And in addition to that, healthcare is covered.
It blows my mind. Like a lot of the European people that I've met, not British, but like people from Spain, my wife, like a lot of people just have master's degrees. Like
everyone. So I want to, I was talking to a Dutch friend who's here at MIT with me, and this is her second master's degree.
Christ.
She's like, everyone in Europe. No, because she said it's natural. Everyone in Europe gets a master's degree, or at least everyone in the Netherlands, she said, gets a master's degree because it's paid for. It's standard practice. I mean, it's typically you go straight from undergrad. I think it's funded under a certain age.
Yeah,
I think that's how they manage it in Europe. Like you can't just go at like age 40 and like claim your master's degree. But I think if you do it like up to like maybe 24, 25, or like kind of close to undergrad, then it's covered. And so that's remarkable. So the fact that you and again, the more wealthy countries in Europe, I know like the Netherlands, they give you a stipend as well if you're in school. Spain doesn't really do that. I mean, not every country, of course, not every, but it's just wonderful to incentivize that and to just have that be sort of separate from your like individual personal accumulation of wealth, right? I think education, public education, that's like that's for for greater society. That's like doing
that without putting people under like mountains of debt. Like it blew my mind to find out like my wife, like. At like 22 or 23, she had finished her undergrad and she had a master's degree and she had zero debt.
Yeah.
And it's not like, you know, applying for fuckloads of scholarships constantly. It's like that's just the norm. And like it's bullshit the way we do it in the States. Like, oh, all of the prestige, all of like you're getting the best. Are we really getting the best though? In a lot of cases. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, the whole thing, you know, I've also spoken to some other grad students here who also come from primarily Europe, who had to take out loans because they don't really qualify anymore as being like, you know, again, because they're also traveling internationally. I think you obviously don't get a master's degree in the US. Like that's not part, but I know a couple of people who were able to get interest-free loans for their education. You know, having that be a category of loans issued by the government that are again like that's a whole other thing that I think is awesome and you know I think the issue with debt and I mean obviously there's so many issues with the way that the educational system here is structured, but it's just crazy to me how you know what education costs here. I heard about this I can't remember the name, but there is a document on the price of basically secondary education and the economics behind or lack thereof behind how they've sort of maintained the same quality or the same product has not evolved in like 100 years, but somehow its price has.
Because so much of it is like the marketing of it. It's about the prestige of it. It's academia as like this quality, the stamp of quality that you know everybody has to bow down to.
Yeah, there's also this NYU professor who critiques. I forget. I'm trying to remember his name now. He critiques secondary education here, and he like doesn't accept his salary from NYU.
Oh wow!
Because he speaks up against it so much about how what they're charging students, what they're paying faculty, and how much they're actually retaining in earnings, right? And how it's just it's crazy. And also, what's really interesting is that here, like being a grad student in the US is really interesting because it becomes kind of your full-time job. Like not business school. I was in another graduate program before that was research based, so that was very much like work and doing work for university, but then still paying to be there. That's a whole weird concept.
So you did cyborg anthropology, and now you're doing fintech. Well, what's with the?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the whole cyborg anthropology thing and my interest in technology really started in undergrad. I I studied archaeology.
This is a really interesting mix of things. I was hoping you would just say like, oh, I watched Iron Man, and I was like, oh, this is cool.
No, so I was studying political science, but with a focus on like culture and an intersection of culture and political science.
Sounds like anthropology.
And so, yeah, and then I also studied. In addition to that, I was in classical archaeology. You know, I had studied ancient Greek when I was younger, and I was really interested in antiquity and the classics. But when I get to undergrad, I discover archaeology, and I'm like, okay, this is actually way more up my alley than linguistics. So I discovered. So
where did you go to? Where did you go for undergrad?
Georgetown in DC. And yeah, so I, fell in love with archaeology, wrote my undergrad thesis on first century graffiti from Pompeii as ancient social media and how like people leverage technology, which was writing and scribing. And again, it's also like using these tools for communication in a non-literate way, in the same way that we might do things online that are not exactly like literal communication, but they convey something. So what this really is reputation building.
It's ancient memes.
And how. Well, no, it's more like ancient LinkedIn, right? So what happened in Pompeii, in a lot of these sort of wealthy Roman villas, was that they had their walls were covered in graffiti. So signatures mainly of people.
Of the sculptors and the.
No, just anybody.
Oh.
Visitors that they've had. So in the same way that you like today we broadcast our social networks, right? Who our friends are, who we tag in our posts, who we're connected with on LinkedIn. We're always sort of, the way we sort of establish our reputation in these sort of virtual spaces is by showing who we're affiliated with. And the way they did that in antiquity was with graffiti, because again, it was a non-literate society. So people weren't like writing messages on walls or things like that. People were like, drawing their insignias. So like, let's say there was a group, like they called them colleges, which were kind of like clubs of laundromats, like of like people who work in the laundry industry, like put their stamp or insignia on someone's wall, shows that that person is supported by this group of people, or like a famous or some other person has their signature be quite famous, and they put something on your wall, so that when some people, new people come into your life or come in to do business with you, they look around and say, okay, you must be all right, because I recognize some of these symbols. I know who these people are. Like I have friends that are also working.
So it was like it was resume building, really.
Yeah. It was all about reputation, and that was primarily to facilitate trade. And anyways, all of this stuff is what actually got me into blockchain. I was like, that's what got me into consensus. Actually, I was having a conversation with someone who ended up hiring me, and was like, oh, this is exactly what what we're like doing for decentralized identity. Like, how can we like use like attestations to build reputation, and what that means for people who don't have like traditional like credit scoring or identity or whatever. And anyways, so archaeology is what made me fall in love with tech, because all archaeology really is studying the built environment. So technology, which is everything in the built environment is technology, to better understand humans and society at given points in time. So then I started to view people and just humans in general as these identities, or at these like beings that are kind of inseparable from technology, right?
So cyborg as in not like the sci-fi, but more as like the interaction between humans and technology.
It's a play on that, because I think a lot of sci-fi and a lot of the cyborg trope is often used. Again, I think people have thought about how we are sort of inseparable from like the technology that we use, and that our identity and what we do in the world is all enabled by technology in some way.
Try taking somebody's phone away; they're not going to want to separate from it.
Yeah. So the way I look at humans and the way I understand my anthropological approach is all anchored in our use of technology and what that says about who we are and what we're in any given point in time. And that started with my with studying the first century, And then that's what got me curious about working in modern technology, because what I identified in my research, like in archaeology, was that, you know what, like, we're using technology for all the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we still need social network. We're still social networking on in these virtual spaces. We still need to curate our virtual identities in some way, and we're using,
And these are
again,
all still
our
for the
social
purpose of trade.
to enable that for the purpose of trade or
Yeah.
whatever, right? Branding is not a new thing. And again, like, having this sort of curated virtual version of yourself is something that we've been doing forever. And so that's what got me super, like, again, so that's like what this all comes
Mm-hmm.
from. And, you know, there is a field within, primarily within, well, there's science technology studies, which is essentially like anthropology, anchored in science and technology. And there is also, like, within feminism and feminist sort of media studies, media technology studies. There's also sort of a lot of research on how technology, and also being able to sort of exist in these virtual places has sort of, or has promised to sort of free women from their bodies and people who've been subjugated.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily have to do with gender, but let's say
Just
race or any
whoever
sort
is
of
like
identity,
repressed, oppressed, whoever like are not like
whatever.
at the
Yeah,
mainstream of like social discourse or whatever.
exactly. Or what we say, or how we call it in sort of sociology and anthropology, as the subaltern, the all the
Subaltern.
whoever, yeah, so the subaltern. So in sort of any dichotomy or any sort of dualism, the one that is below or oppressed or whatever, and that could be the other in other terms, right? And so what's interesting, and like why I was sort of like what got me interested in you know, pursuing this in an academic capacity is, like, you know, I was thinking deeply about the internet and text-based social networking, like with live journaling, with Reddit,
Threads,
and
yeah.
just being able,
Forums.
being able to experiment and be like, be a pseudonym, be a word, be words, and what it
Be
means
words.
to, yeah, you kind of like, what is the self, and it's like, what is the disembodied self, and how can the self
And how would
express
you
itself
describe yourself to
without
somebody?
having
Yeah.
being, or how would you be and how would you communicate without having all of these external identifiers that already predetermine how someone else is going to perceive you? So like, you're a woman or you're an Asian man, so I, like, you know, I already have my
How dare you
biases
assume I'm
against
one
you, so I have
person?
filtering. What exactly? So I already have these filters that are, again, and I think what happens is that we're out, these filters, you know, they do their job, they certainly filter, and not allow us to sort of maybe in some ways connect directly with one another. So, you know, I was thinking about how, you know, the internet was supposed to enable this, and I think people were super psyched about the internet back in the day with LiveJournal, GeoCities, and whatever, because people could start
GeoCities.
experimenting. No, but people could start experimenting and like connect and like be this being outside of outside of the stuff that people may not care about as much. Like, I want to identify as a woman, or I may not want to have you know I'm a woman, so I can just communicate an idea without you filtering it. So yeah, so that's what got me interested in this,
Which
and
also
got me thinking about,
I'd say that
yeah.
also opened up like a new channel of like people kind of like showing how really horrible people are if you don't have all of these like if you don't have all these visible external qualifiers.
True, exactly. So it's, yeah, there's that, but it's also fascinating to think about. You know, we talked a little bit about policing, and I think what's happening with social media now is that I think we're also self-policing and self-regulating in a way that is maybe become a little too unnatural as well. I think right now, with how social media is, or without Insta, being live, being in performance mode all the time, and also because, you know, in the past, or like like what I before when I was talking about, like in antiquity, people were like inscribing on walls. Like, you're kind of still removed from the technology, and you're able to separate the virtual self and the physical self, and like be, you know, like have identities for certain purposes. Like you see my wall and it's my commerce.
Literal walls.
Literal walls are like for commerce.
Uh,
But now everything, all of the lines have blurred.
mm-hmm.
We're constantly
There's so much abstraction with like everything we're doing now.
Yeah, and it's all this like sort of hyper, vigilance. We're seeing everyone. There's so much what's it called? Surveillance. There's like this surveillance culture where we're
you hear that, the
and
NSA? There's a lot of surveillance culture, wink wink.
yeah, but I mean, like for me sometimes, like when I think about, like I don't really do, as someone who loves social media,
Mm-hmm.
like that's like my like field of interest and
Yet you don't have a Twitter.
I don't.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a very smart thing.
No, because I think about these, maybe I think about them a little too much because I'm just so aware. And again, this is like what I'm studying
Mm-hmm.
or what I have studied and sort of tried to sort of come to terms with, is that we have this like, now, anybody can look you up and anybody can, and it kind of gives me this anxiety about like, okay, I may want to say something in one place and have one specific audience for that I don't want to, share with another audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now these days I'm like, well, it's not really possible to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of very careful about social media and keeping things private because in so many ways I'm trying to preserve my multiple identities.
Yeah, we are very much like the guinea pigs about trying to figure out how to be properly, how to maintain privacy before like the next generation.
Yeah. And that's the cyborg thing too. Some other cyborg anthropologists or cyborg feminists or whatever believe in like this, that we have like these multiple fluid identities, like we're multiple things. And I think that's something that I find this sort of hyper policed or this sort of the current social media surveillance culture doesn't really allow anymore.
When you're saying surveillance, do you kind of mean like the fear of somebody like you're canceling you, essentially? The fear of, because people are watching you and everything's being recorded, that like you might say something wrong or might do something that like you might regret down the line. Okay, so not surveillance as in like somebody just like watching you without you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's more basic than that. I think that on a very subconscious level too. I think conscious and subconscious, but if we break it down even more, that the minute you have an audience or you're being watched, you definitely regulate the way that you are. Like you wouldn't like.
That's what these are for.
Exactly, but you wouldn't But you otherwise wouldn't walk around the streets naked, or you wouldn't say something completely obscene, knowing that you might have someone listening or watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happening now with social media to an even greater extent. Is that, at least with people like me who like have social media anxiety and don't want to like post so much because I don't want to have people like, thinking I'm a certain way or whatever. So I think that for me, that the whole surveillance thing it's a very basic, and very, I don't know. So I think just the fact that we're constantly being watched and everything is and there's sort of this blurred line between public and private space on the internet.
I'd say it's a fairly well justified modern paranoia.
Yeah.
So how did you transition? So that, I mean, it's a very fascinating like educational arc. So how did that lead you then to fintech with MIT, besides being in already the crypto space? Is it like a pragmatic thing, or is it like is there some sort of like logical train between them?
So I love school. I always have.
Nerd.
Obviously. No, but I really love being in an academic environment, and I thought that getting my doctorate, which I was starting, was the right path for me. But I'm also very much interested in being at the forefront of technology and working in like a building capacity and I hadn't taken into consideration. Well, I didn't know that by pursuing a doctorate or going kind of the very heavily academic route that I wouldn't be able to do both. I thought I could sort of work on products or work on projects and build new things while being in school. But I realized that, it doesn't really work that way. Like in academia, especially in tech research, you're
You're constantly having to
you're
like
not
do new
really,
research and then also defend like theses and stuff.
yeah, you're actually engaging in like really old and long-standing conversations, because all academia is responding to one another's
Yeah,
ideas, and like some of these ideas are super old. And so you're not really building, in a
it's a
way.
forum with like
You're not
really
like
high
sitting at the
barriers to
forefront.
entry,
Yeah, you're like in your ivory tower debating like media theory from the
as opposed to
1950s,
like
and
innovating
like,
and like
oh,
creating these like new things that either that address actually the things that you guys have been talking about.
right. So it's different. So you're not really in this sort of building culture, or you're not in the building space so much, at least where I was, or at least in research. Um, and so I thought, well, one of my favorite sort of female um, academics or
Mm-hmm.
professors, Sherry Turkle, she has been studying identity,
Mm-hmm.
um, and identity sort of mediated with technology, since like the 70s and 80s. She's like an older woman anthropologist here at MIT. So I followed her here. I thought I would be a student. I thought I would. Her name is Sherry Turkle. I love her. You should check out her work. She talks about, I don't know. I think beginning like the late 80s, she was talking about how like computers, if it would eventually be mirrors of the self,
Mm-hmm.
right before a lot of the social media as we know it existed. So she's super cool. And there's a program where she's a professor here, and I was looking at their doctoral program to like work under her. And then I realized, okay, this is so far. I mean, it's just too far away from
Physically or
actual building. No, just like
oh yeah, okay, gotcha.
they're just not. I thought there would be. It's really tough to sort of to do both research and working in a sort of innovation at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. But I found that specifically this MBA program at MIT was sort of the best place I could imagine doing that, because it's a science and technology focused business program.
Mm-hmm.
And MIT is very, I mean, it's a maker school. The whole point about being here
Yeah,
is it's all about making shit. So so I thought it would be a good place to do both. And I got a fellowship, which was wonderful. So it just sounded like a good place to experiment
yeah,
and to be
it's
here,
insane.
sit at the,
It's insane, like the
yeah,
schools that you've kind of gotten to go to, NYU, MIT,
yeah,
Georgetown. Like these are really like prestigious schools, and like it is. I imagine a very big like making the decision of like staying in academia and like being part of and like part of the influencing world. Not being like a fucking
yeah.
YouTube influencer, but as in like being somebody at the forefront of you know how are we making things better, as opposed to just kind of like
Yeah.
reviewing where we are in and citing every sort of resource that you use to arrive at the conclusion that we are where we are. uh,
Yeah. No, it's been such a wonderful journey. And again, because I'm a nerd, like
nerd.
I want to be in these places. I mean, I follow. I mean, there are people out there that I sort of follow, and they follow their research, and I kind of want to be close to them. Um, so
Hi professor, I've been
yeah, no,
ghosting you for the
it's
last 2 years.
yeah. So again, it's a thing. No, I mean, I just really like. Um, again, I like theory. I like academic literature, but but again, it's not the only thing I can do, or the only thing I will commit to
Mm-hmm.
doing. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see what happens. But what I really want to work on are solving these sort of identity issues
Mm-hmm.
in technology, and try and be on the better side of tech that enables more humanity to come out, because I think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible to use technology to amplify human identity, human nature, and instead of policing it, or instead of adversely affecting it. Like these days, social media and just being on screens in general is very isolating, and it leads to poor mental health in many ways. And I just want to be on the side. I just want to think of ways to improve our relationship with one another and our relationship with technology, and having that.
Yeah, and I'm sure like being able
so
to
that's sort of
like better facilitate your own like identity and like be in better control of that. I mean, that is a lot of like what psychology and therapy is like, you know, kind of supposed to help people, you know, resolve
yeah,
and be able to be comfortable with and happy with.
yeah, totally. So yeah, we'll see. Whatever I do next will have something to do with that, I hope.
Dope.
I don't know. It's tough. I mean, it's. I definitely want to like. I'm really interested in interfaces. After reading this book of another MIT professor who
You're a big MIT
taught.
fangirl, aren't you?
Well, no, it's not like I'm an MIT fangirl. I think that I'm just a fan of MIT. I think again the culture. No, but like the MIT sort of building an experimentation, sort of scientific.
You're a big fan of like
or
the
at least it's
ethos.
innovating. Yeah, of like being in these maker spaces where people are like thinking about these problems and have the technological expertise and technical expertise, which I don't. I don't have the hard skills. I don't know how to. I'm not an engineer, but it's nice to sit with engineers because they can actually do stuff. I'm like the person there seeding ideas and then seeing other people can build it. So this is a perfect place for that. But anyways, he has this book. His name is David Rose. He has this book called Enchanted Objects, and he sort of, you know, is pushing back against this sort of screen industry and screen culture, and you know, is sort of advocating for technologists to build tools again, like tools that have greater powers, not just more screens, so that we can still like use our bodies and use our minds and exercise.
You think this guy like a VR?
No, not VR. So like again, some of the experiments he's run have been very simple. Like he has a pill box. He did a pill box that has an alarm so that you can remember to take your pill and not just use your phone alarm for everything. Then he found that people respond more to like objects that remind you to do something, or like an umbrella that tells you the weather.
I see.
So you're like interacting with objects that have a little. The reason the book's called Enchanted Objects is that they have more like technological capabilities and are developing and are doing more things rather than having everything centralized on your phone.
It's a very interesting, different decentralization.
Yeah. And so he talks about like how in our collective sort of shared imagination of the future, where we had like flying cars and or in like folklore where broomsticks could let us fly, and we're using.
So he wants to make like a smart everything.
Yeah, so he's very much like a smart home IoT kind of guy, and I think I would love to work in that space because I don't want to do, and I think especially after a year of Zoom, to just be on my phone the whole day. Anyways,
what do you think then about like VR stuff? Because like there are a lot of new like burgeoning like VR implementations that are beyond just gaming.
Yeah,
and
I
they're
think
like
VR...
you know, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like the one where you pick an avatar and you're just like able to interact with a bunch of other people online.
Yeah, no, I truthfully don't know too much about VR. One of my best friends actually works in VR. I should ask her. But again, I don't know too much about it. I'm so curious about it, especially from this like social networking perspective of like choosing your body.
There's this
or the way you.
There's this fascinating like a company that they're doing VR classes. Essentially, is like it's like you're able to like record an entire 3-dimensional classroom. You're able to have kids like you're able to have people sitting in classrooms. You can record things. You can bring in MPEGs. You can bring in GIFs. You can bring in full 3D models. You can bring in like dinosaurs that come storming through the classroom.
Oh,
everything's recorded. You're able to control like. If these two students are talking to each other too much, you can mute them. You can move them around. You can run experiments and stuff in class, and everything's like recorded. So like if there are any sort of like conflicts or any problems that happen in class, you can like review it. Or if somebody's not in class that day, they're able to rewatch the entire lesson. And part of the idea with it also is that it's like way more affordable than having to physically go into like a physical space. You know, you could spend hundreds of dollars on textbooks, or you could pay once for in like 1 year, like $500 for like the VR headset, and you can go in and like all of the technology is already there in that space, and everything's recorded for you, and you can copy all the notes, you can study and review stuff there. It's still like
I don't
it's
know.
still like really new, but like I'm looking forward to a lot of like these kind of things. It's just I'm also worried about, you know, where the reality of your space then becomes that VR world.
Yeah, no, I think there is something that I want to make sure. Oh, something that I would like to see preserved is, physical and bodily
Hmm.
intelligence, right? I think we have a lot of like stimuli for our eyes, so like things that we are seeing, and we're getting very good at just sitting in place and like absorbing content through our eyes.
Yeah, we are certainly
And
the generation that's been sitting more of our lives than any other generation.
yeah, and I think it's so important, at least it's important to me to to still develop intelligence and through movement and just and interacting, and using my body in a way, that develops other types of intelligence. So I don't know. Let's
Definitely why I
see.
still like sports and like martial arts and
Yeah,
stuff, and dance, like social dance.
yeah, totally. So yeah, I don't know. So in terms, if so, I'm still. I would love to see how these VR, products or whatever you want to call them, are designed or developed in the future. But I think I still want to sort of interact with the environment as much as possible and physical tools as much as
Hmm.
possible. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely weird to kind of imagine like coexisting side by side, like a world that we haven't already completely destroyed by like
Yeah.
climate change or whatever, but also like this new technology that allows us to not care if the world outside is being destroyed. You know,
Yeah.
and just like in all the dystopias up till now, it's always been like one or the other. There is either the virtual world and like the outside world's destroyed, or you're in this outside world and the virtual world doesn't exist really. And we are definitely at that crossroads where, you know, both of these things are coming into the reality, and we have to decide, can we preserve one while growing the other, or vice versa, you know.
Yeah.
We are very much
Yeah.
we are the into the deep end generation.
Okay. Yeah.
Fuck
100%.
XYZ
100%.
millennial. We are the ones who are like tossed into like the
Yeah.
flowing river filled with salmon and bears still clawing at everybody.
Yeah, I guess that's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Sorry, I like my overly extensive metaphors. Actually, we were talking earlier about like movies and stuff. I've got one more to go, but I'm almost caught up with all the Studio Ghibli movies.
Okay, which one are
So
you, or
I
which
just
one?
watched Ponyo, and on the cliff by
Oh,
the
okay.
river, or on the cliff by the sea or something. Like all of the Studio Ghibli movies are fascinating in that they have like widely different like premises and like messages. Uh, they a lot of them have very different intended audiences, in my opinion. Um, like Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind is way different from like uh, My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's
Yeah,
Delivery Service.
but but I feel like they have that kind of environmental, sort of natural, preserve the natural world theme
Yeah, a
in a
lot of them
way.
very much have that. Hayao Miyazaki is very big on like a lot of his movies take from a lot of like the Shinto culture stuff. They have a lot of the yokai spirits, um, which is fascinating. Like the way Japan has retains a degree, well, while remaining a secular state by and large, there is still a lot of this like cultural spiritualism, um, often tied to like Shintoism. Like sumo wrestlers, like one of the belts that like the master sumo wrestler's gonna wear is like this rope that is tied over temples, and he's like saying, "You can't fucking pass this. No evil spirits in here. Try to fucking move me, bro." Uh, and like Legend of Zelda, the guy who made it, Shigeru Miyamoto, a lot of his all the creatures in like the Legend of Zelda games are based on like these temples that he would go to as a kid growing up.
Oh, no
Yeah,
way. Didn't realize.
yeah. Shintoism is like super big in like Ocarina of Time and just like the mentality of
Gosh.
like time and of loss, but also preserving nature. It's very interesting how much of that is still like preserved in a lot of the new media that's being like put out there. There's a lot of spirits in like different animes. It's a very prevalent notion without it just being like evil ghosts, evil spirits, the devil, the demons. There's a lot of this, a lot more nuance to the spiritual world in a lot of Japanese
Yeah, that's right.
Japanese media, which like I don't know. It's kind of a shame that we've kind of lost that mysticism outside of like Christian backgrounds in a lot of the West.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, well, all we have is like the
Um,
demonology, exorcists. Got like the ghost stories, supernatural witches, and like it's witches in like they're
like
evil.
evil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Philippines also there's a lot of like superstition. Like my grandma was always
Aswang
she'd always tell us lots of these stories as kids.
about with the aswang and the kapre and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, we do have a lot of like, yeah, scary. We have scary sort of demons in our folklore, but we also have like we also believe in forest spirits.
Hmm.
Like ask, I don't know if you've ever encountered a Filipino who's asked you to tell the forest. I don't know the actual term for them, gnomes, I guess, or like the little people in the forest to step aside when you walk in the
Like
forest
elves or
to
something,
ask for
or
sort of, yeah. It's common to ask for, yeah, we do have these
I have heard
superstitions,
about
and some
that.
of them are not necessarily,
I have heard about that
yeah.
one, but I've never met any Filipino people who do that.
Okay, well, it's normal in the provinces to like ask for permission to walk in a place,
Hmm.
not from like an evil thing,
Yeah,
but from
it is interesting in like still having that like sacred notion to nature. You know, now
yeah.
that's like left to Native Americans and like these weird shamans and these mystics in other places. When like you know I'm very much like not religious. I'm very much not. I'm very much against like this whole making things greater than they kind of are. But at the same time, I definitely recognize that the world also needs respect in its in like the way things interact with each other and like things are meant to kind of destroy each other. Uh, and like a lot of the nuance with like the spirits and like yokai and shit. It's like
Hmm.
you're disrespecting your property. You're like leaving out your sandals. You're destroying. You're not treating your umbrellas well or something. An evil spirit will manifest in there and like it'll try to punish you for
Oh
that. Yeah,
yeah.
you've never
Oh
seen that like the umbrella with like the eye on it and the
no, I have
it's got
not.
like it's got
I
like
have
one
not.
foot and it's like wearing a sandal. Yeah,
No,
they've
no.
got spirits for a lot of
That's
weird shit in Japan.
that's super cool.
But yeah, the
Nice.
we're starting I think to get towards the coexist with the environment instead of just change it because you don't like it.
Yeah, I mean that's super important. Something that we should all focus on.
Yeah. Though again, I don't want to get too much into like the spirituality nonsense of it. Uh, I say nonsense entirely refuting my own like I respect things.
Well, how are we? So I'm gonna have to leave soon.
Yeah. We're about at the hour 30 mark. Um,
Awesome.
you're good to go. Do you have anything you really want to plug? Anything you want to talk about, like
No,
either Mochi or in your personal life, personal whatever. You know, being on the social media, but no.
no, not so much. I mean, I'm just really happy to be a part of Mochi, I think, and well, I know, it's really been, especially during this pandemic, it's really been such a great space to still connect with people meaningfully, and
Mhm.
just want to spread the Mochi love and meet more people. Hopefully this year we can all sort of get together in person.
Yeah, I eventually gotta come once I'm back stateside. I need to go to some of the gatherings and stuff because I'm
Yeah.
only talking to some people. I'm hoping to talk to more, but like it'd be nice to get my drink on with some folk, you know.
Yeah, we have to do it. Hopefully, I mean, I'm confident that sometime this year we can make it
At least in the
happen.
states.
At least in the
Yeah.
States. At least in the States.
I have
yeah.
to plug Mochi Zine coming out April 1st. I think April 1st. It's coming out soon. I've done some of the editing. I've read a lot of the pieces. They're very interesting. Look forward to it. I'm not sure how it's going to be coming out, but it's coming out soon. Amanda, thank you for being my guest. Thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you for doing this. I had a really great time talking
Yeah,
to
it
you.
was a very interesting path of discussion.
Certainly.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
You
All right.
too.
Signing out.
Bye.
Bye.